A student's overview of the Ageless Wisdom was carefully compiled from the following books by Alice A. Bailey. A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. Esoteric Psychology, Volumes 1 and 2. Esoteric Healing. Esoteric Astrology. The Rays and the Initiations. Students are encouraged to download the free PDF version of this overview by following the link in the video's description, or to order a printed copy at cost from thebookpatch.com, but are advised to read the original, unabridged books in order to gain deeper insight into the Ageless Wisdom. Students are also invited to join our online study group at facebook.com/groups/students of the Ageless Wisdom. Chapter 1, Introduction. Teaching, if true, must be in line with the past and must provide scope for endeavor in the present and must also hold out further enlightenment for those who have succeeded or are succeeding in attaining the indicated goals. There must be a spiritual future indicated. It is that which is required now, for many are attaining the goals proposed by the hierarchy, and others are working towards them. The taking of initiation is now often to be seen and is far more frequent today than at any other time in the history of the race. For those who have thus succeeded, the next step forward and the new spiritual enticement must be clearly disclosed. Evolution is not a static thing. Death cannot be the reward of living effort. To be static, to have attained all that can be attained, and to be at a complete standstill would be utter death and, my brothers, there is no death. There is only progress from glory to glory, a moving forward from point to point on the divine way, and from revelation to revelation towards those points and revelations which are perhaps part of the goal of God Himself. Signed, the Tibetan. End of page. Introduction by the editor. This abrigment is dedicated to the Tibetan and Alice I. Bailey, and to all within the teaching ashrams of the Ray of Love and Wisdom. The work accomplished by Alice A. Bailey and the Tibetan, since revealed as the Master of Wisdom, Chwal Khul, can hardly be given too much praise, for in the Blue Books, they succeeded in delivering a great deal of the Ageless Wisdom to the world. Their 7 core books, each masterfully presented with the clarity and order of a textbook, represent the essential current of truth that runs through the sciences, religions and philosophies of man, and unites them all under cosmic law. Within their body of work are found the laws and processes that underlie the love of the Christ and the wisdom of the Buddha. Herein are found answers to the true nature of God, the cosmos, spiritual and solar fire, the not-self and the true self. I demonstrate my gratitude for their service by attempting to apply the essential teachings in my life, and this overview is just such an attempt. I am confident that the work was overseen not only by my higher self, but by both DK and AAB, for I felt their presences throughout the process. The sutratma that they created between themselves, and their body of work is strong and alive with vibrancy, and it was their discrimination that I relied upon when selecting text for inclusion. Yet, the karma for errors and omissions between the treatises and this humble abrigment, must necessarily rest upon my shoulders. I freely offer this abrigment to the world in the spirit of love and intelligent service, and I believe it will, as a thought form rightfully conceived and constructed, succeed in its purpose. The purpose of this abrigment is threefold. 1. To coalesce a condensed form of the ageless wisdom, and this for 3 reasons. A. To assimilate the data and develop an efficient method of studying the essential teachings. B. To circulate, teach and learn the ageless wisdom with friends and family with the aid of an efficient study guide and teaching aid. C. To transmit the essential teachings to those seekers who may not take the time to read the full books, with the goal of transmitting approximately 70% of the essential teachings at only 15% of the length. 2. To promote awareness of the ageless wisdom within studious occult circles, such as light workers and healers in the New Age movements, Hermetic Kabbalists, Christian mystics, ceremonial magicians and astrologers. Some within these groups suffer heavily under dogma and misunderstood tradition, and will benefit greatly by the study of cosmic law. 3. To quantify and demystify the ageless wisdom for the benefit of the global population. This has in mind the following 4 aspects. A. General psychology and self-improvement, through a greater perspective of one's microcosmic self, as well as man's position within the planetary scheme. Individuals will be able to respond to life's challenges with greater mobility and intelligence. B. Unification of science, religion and philosophy, through an understanding of the law of analogy. The scientist who studies the ageless wisdom stands to gain much when he considers the living atom of matter. The Orthodox Christian may find illumination as to the nature of God, the Father and the Son, while philosophers will discover the occult reason behind that warmth, which is felt as individual, brotherly and group love. All will benefit through knowledge of the concrete processes and abstract interactions that occur in, and actually create of their own essence, the seen and unseen worlds around us. C. Harmlessness, through right thought and speech. Through a proper comprehension of the power of thought forms, individuals will come to control the lower impulses, to seek harmlessness in all that they do, and to eventually radiate only the true essence of their egoic ray. D. Intelligent individual and group activity. Societal reforms based on the ageless wisdom will promote enhanced unity within the human collective, and the intelligent organization and activity that will result is the natural flow of evolution, for the divine plan works toward the greatest good of all. In unity, love and light. Patrick Westphal. End of page. Introduction to a Treatise on Cosmic Fire. By Foster Bailey. The story of the many years of telepathic work by the Tibetan with Alice A. Bailey is revealed in her unfinished autobiography, published in 1951. This includes the circumstances of her first contact with him, on the physical plane, which took place in California in November 1919. 30 years' work was planned. When this had been accomplished, and within 30 days after that period, Mrs. Bailey gained her release from the limitations of the physical vehicle. The autobiography also contains certain statements by the Tibetan in regard to his work and some information as to the reasons why it was undertaken. In the early stages, the work involved careful attention to the physical plane conditions which might best help to make the telepathic process more successful. But during the latter years the technique was so perfected and the etheric mechanism of AAB so skillfully attuned and adjusted that the whole process was practically effortless, and the reality and practical usefulness of telepathic interplay was demonstrated to an unique degree. The spiritual truths dealt with involved in many cases the expression by the lower concrete mind, often with the insuperable restrictions of the English language, of abstract ideas and hitherto quite unknown concepts of spiritual realities. This unescapable limitation of truth has been frequently called to the attention of the readers of the books so produced, but is all too often forgotten. Its constant remembrance will constitute in the years to come one of the chief factors in preventing the crystallization of the teaching from producing yet one more dogmatic sectarian cult. The present volume, a treatise on cosmic fire, first published in 1925, was the third book jointly produced and carries inherent evidence that it will stand as the major and most far-reaching portion of the 30-year teachings, notwithstanding the profundity and usefulness of the volumes published in the series entitled A Treatise on the Seven Rays or of any other of the books. During the long course of the work, the minds of the Tibetan and AAB became so closely attuned that they were in effect, so far as much of the production of the teaching was concerned, a single joint projecting mechanism. Even to the end, AAB often spoke of her amazement at the glimpses she obtained through contact with the Tibetan's mind, of limitless vistas of spiritual truths which she could not possibly have otherwise contacted, and often of a quality she could not possibly express. This experience was the basis of her often proclaimed but frequently little understood assertion that all the teachings she was aiding in producing was in fact only the ABC of esoteric knowledge, and that in the future she would gladly abandon any pronouncement in the present teaching, when she found better and more deeply esoteric teaching available. Clear and profound as the teaching actually is in the books published in her name, the truths imparted are so partial and subject to later revelation and expansion that this fact, if constantly remembered, will give us a second much-needed safeguard against that quality of the concrete mind which constantly tends to produce sectarianism. At the very beginning of the joint effort and after careful consideration, it was decided between the Tibetan, DK, and AAB that she as the working disciple on the outer plane should shoulder as much as possible of karmic responsibility on that plane, and that the teaching should go to the public over her signature. This involved the burden of leadership in the esoteric field and precipitated attack and condemnation from persons and organizations whose positions and activities were more piscan and authoritarian. The entire platform upon which esoteric teaching stands before the public today has been liberated from the limitations and follies of mystery, glamour, claim-making and impracticality, by the position taken by the Tibetan and AAB. The stand taken against dogmatic assertion has helped to establish a new era of mental freedom for the students of the progressively unfolding revelation of the ageless wisdom. End of page 1. The age-old method of arriving at truth by the process of accepting new authorities and comparing them with previously established doctrines, while of undoubted value in the training of the mind, is gradually being transcended. In its place is emerging in both the religious and philosophical worlds a new capacity to take a more scientific position. Spiritual teaching will be increasingly accepted as an hypothesis to be proved less by scholasticism, historical foundation and authority, and more by the results of its effect upon the life lived and its practical usefulness in solving the problems of humanity. Heretofore, advanced esoteric teaching has almost invariably been obtainable only by the student's acceptance of the authority of the teacher, varying degrees of personal obedience to that teacher and pledges of secrecy. As the new Aquarian dispensation progresses, these limitations will disappear. The personal relation of the disciple to the master remains, but already discipleship training has been attempted in group formation. The record of one such experiment and attempt to use this New Age method has been made available to the public in the book entitled Discipleship in the New Age, which gives the direct personal instructions by the Tibetan to a selected group. In a treatise on cosmic fire, the Tibetan has given us what H.P. Blavatsky prophesied he would give, namely the psychological key to the cosmic creation. HPB stated that in the 20th century a disciple would come who would give the psychological key to her own monumental work, The Secret Doctrine, on which treatise the Tibetan worked with her, and Alice A. Bailey worked in complete recognition of her own task in this sequence. Foster Bailey. Tunbridge Wells. December 1950. Foreword by Alice A. Bailey. This treatise on cosmic fire has a five-fold purpose in view. First, to provide a compact and skeleton outline of a scheme of cosmology, philosophy, and psychology which may perhaps be employed for a generation as a reference and a textbook, and may serve as a scaffolding upon which more detailed instruction may later be built, as the great tide of evolutionary teaching flows on. Secondly, to express that which is subjective in comprehensible terms, and to point out the next step forward in the understanding of the true psychology. It is an elucidation of the relation existing between spirit and matter, which relation demonstrates as consciousness. It will be found that the treatise deals primarily with the aspect of mind, with consciousness and with the higher psychology, and less with matter as we know of it on the physical plane. The danger involved in giving out information concerning the various energies of atomic matter is too great, and the race as yet too selfish to be entrusted with these potencies. Man is already, through the able work of the scientists, discovering the needed knowledge with adequate rapidity. The emphasis in this book will be found to be laid upon those forces which are responsible for the objective manifestation of a solar logos and of man, and only in the first section will indication be given as to the nature of those energies which are strictly confined to the physical plane. Thirdly, to show the coherent development of all that is found within a solar system, to demonstrate that everything which exists evolves, from the lowest form of life at the densest point of concretion up to the highest and most tenuous manifestation, and that all forms are but the expression of a stupendous and divine existence. This expression is caused by the blending of two divine aspects through the influence of a third, and produces the manifestation which we call a form, starting it upon its evolutionary cycle in time and space. Thus is form brought to the point where it is an adequate medium for the demonstration of the nature of that which we call God. Fourthly, to give practical information anent those focal points of energy which are found in the etheric bodies of the solar logos, the macrocosm, and of man, the microcosm. As the etheric substratum, which is the true substance underlying every tangible form, is understood, certain great revolutions will be brought about in the domains of science, of medicine and of chemistry. The study of medicine, for instance, will eventually be taken up from a new angle, and its practice will be built upon a comprehension of the laws of radiation, of magnetic currents, and of the force centers found in men's bodies and their relationship to the force centers and currents of the solar system. End of page 2. Fifthly, to give some information, hitherto not exotrically imparted as to the place and work of those myriads of sentient lives who form the essence of objectivity, to indicate the nature of those hierarchies of existences who form out of their own substance all that is seen and known, and who are themselves fire and the cause of all the heat, warmth, life and motion in the universe. In this way the action of fire on water, of heat in matter, whether macrocosmically or microcosmically considered, will be touched upon and some light thrown upon the law of cause and effect, the law of karma, and its significance in the solar system. To sum up the matter, the teaching in this book should tend to an expansion of consciousness, and should bring about a recognition of the adequacy, as a working basis, for both science and religion, of that interpretation of the processes of nature which has been formulated for us by the master minds of all time. It should tend to bring about a reaction in favor of a system of philosophy which will link both spirit and matter, and demonstrate the essential unity of the scientific and religious idea. The two are at present somewhat divorced, and we are only just beginning to grope our intellectual way out of the depths of a materialistic interpretation. It must not be forgotten, however, that under the law of action and reaction, the long period of materialistic thought has been a necessary one for humanity, because the mysticism of the Middle Ages has led us too far in the opposite direction. We are now tending to a more balanced view, and it is hoped that this treatise may form part of the process through which equilibrium is attained. In studying this treatise, the student is asked to bear in mind certain things. A. That in dealing with these subjects we are concerned with the essence of that which is objective, with the subjective side of manifestation, and with the consideration of force and of energy. It is well nigh impossible to reduce such concepts to concrete formulas and to express them in such a way that they can be easily apprehended by the average man. B. That as we use words and phrases and speak in terms of modern language, the whole subject necessarily becomes limited and dwarfed, and much of the truth is thereby lost. C. That all that is in this treatise is offered in no dogmatic spirit but simply as a contribution to the mass of thought upon the subject of world origins and to the data already accumulated as to the nature of man. The best that man can offer as a solution of the world problem must perforce take a dual form and will demonstrate through a life of active service, tending to amelioration of environmental conditions, and through a formulation of some cosmological scheme or plan which will seek to account as much as may be for conditions as they are seen to exist. Arguing as men do at present from the basis of the known and the demonstrated, and leaving untouched and unaccounted for those deep-seated causes which must be presumed to be producing the seen and known, all solutions as yet fail and will continue to fail in their objective. D. That all attempts to formulate in words that which must be felt and lived in order to be truly comprehended must necessarily prove distressingly inadequate. All that can be said will be after all but the partial statements of the great veiled truth, and must be offered to the reader and student as simply providing a working hypothesis, and a suggestive explanation. To the open-minded student and the man who keeps the recollection in his mind that the truth is progressively revealed, it will be apparent that the fullest expression of the truth possible at any one time will be seen later to be but a fragment of a whole, and later still be recognized to be only portions of a fact and thus in itself a distortion of the real. This treatise is put out in the hope that it may prove useful to all broad-minded seekers after truth and of value to all investigators into the subjective source of all that which is tangibly objective. It aims to provide a reasonably logical plan of systemic evolution and to indicate to man the part he must play as an atomic unit in a great and corporate whole. This fragment of the secret doctrine, in the turning of the evolutionary wheel, goes out to the world making no claims as to its source, its infallibility or the correctness in detail of its statements. No book gains anything from dogmatic claims or declarations as to the authoritative value of its source of inspiration. It should stand or fall solely on the basis of its own intrinsic worth, on the value of the suggestions made, and its power to foster the spiritual life and the intellectual apprehension of the reader. If this treatise has within it anything of truth and of reality, it will inevitably and unfailingly do its work, carry its message, and thus reach the hearts and minds of searchers everywhere. If it is of no value, and has no basis in fact, it will disappear and die, and most rightly so. All that is asked from the student of this treatise is a sympathetic approach, a willingness to consider the views put forth and that honesty and sincerity of thought which will tend to the development of the intuition, of spiritual diagnosis, and a discrimination which will lead to a rejection of the false and an appreciation of the true. End of page 3. The words of the Buddha most appropriately have their place here, and make a fitting conclusion to these preliminary remarks. The Lord Buddha has said that we must not believe in a thing said merely because it is said, nor traditions because they have been handed down from antiquity, nor rumors, as such, nor writings by sages, because sages wrote them, nor fancies that we may suspect to have been inspired in us by a deva, that is, in presumed spiritual inspiration, nor from inferences drawn from some haphazard assumption we may have made, nor because of what seems an analogical necessity, nor on the mere authority of our teachers or masters. But we are to believe when the writing, doctrine, or saying is corroborated by our own reason and consciousness. For this says he in concluding, I taught you not to believe merely because you have heard, but when you believed of your consciousness, then to act accordingly and abundantly. Secret Doctrine 3. May this be the attitude of every reader of this treatise on cosmic fire, signed, Alice A. Bailey. Extract of a statement by the Tibetan. Suffice it to say, that I am a Tibetan disciple of a certain degree, and this tells you but little, for all are disciples from the humblest aspirant up to, and beyond, the Christ himself. I live in a physical body like other men, on the borders of Tibet, and at times, from the exoteric standpoint, preside over a large group of Tibetan lamas, when my other duties permit. It is this fact that has caused it to be reported that I am an abbot of this particular lamasery. Those associated with me in the work of the hierarchy, and all true disciples are associated in this work, know me by still another name and office. AAB knows who I am and recognizes me by two of my names. I am a brother of yours, who has traveled a little longer upon the path than has the average student, and has therefore incurred greater responsibilities. I am one who has wrestled and fought his way into a greater measure of light than has the aspirant who will read this article, and I must therefore act as a transmitter of the light, no matter what the cost. I am not an old man, as age counts among the teachers, yet I am not young or inexperienced. My work is to teach and spread the knowledge of the ageless wisdom wherever I can find a response, and I have been doing this for many years. I seek also to help the Master M and the Master KH whenever opportunity offers, for I have been long connected with them and with their work. In all the above, I have told you much, yet at the same time I have told you nothing which would lead you to offer me that blind obedience and the foolish devotion which the emotional aspirant offers to the Guru and Master whom he is as yet unable to contact. Nor will he make that desired contact until he has transmuted emotional devotion into unselfish service to humanity, not to the Master. The books that I have written are sent out with no claim for their acceptance. They may, or may not, be correct, true and useful. It is for you to ascertain their truth by right practice and by the exercise of the intuition. Neither I nor AAB is the least interested in having them acclaimed as inspired writings, or in having anyone speak of them as being the work of one of the masters. If they present truth in such a way that it follows sequentially upon that already offered in the world teachings, if the information given raises the aspiration and the will to serve from the plane of the emotions to that of the mind, the plane whereon the masters can be found, then they will have served their purpose. If the teaching conveyed calls forth a response from the illumined mind of the worker in the world, and brings a flashing forth of his intuition, then let that teaching be accepted, but not otherwise. If the statements meet with eventual corroboration, or are deemed true under the test of the law of correspondences, then that is well and good. But should this not be so, let not the student accept what is said. The Tibetan, August, 1934. End of page 4. End of chapter 1.